We're here again presenting another in our oral history series, which is produced in Marshall County by WCBL Radio with a grant from Shelby McCallum, the owner. This will, of course, be utilized throughout the State Archives program with one copy in Frankfort and one at the Pogue Library at Murray State University, as well as Marshall County. Our guest for this half-hour broadcast is Lois R. O'Daniel. I wonder what the R stands for.
Reeves.
Reeves, and was that a family name?
No, that's was the name, the two names I bore from two candidates who were candidates for sheriff about 1903, Lewis Wallace and Dave Reeves.
I think your parents must have been interested in politics.
My dad was, and was a great friend of Mr. Wallace.
So
and
you
Mr. Reeves. Both.
And incidentally, Mr. Lewis has always been very interested and active in
Yes.
politics. We want to touch on that before this program goes.
That's very good.
We'll
Now,
get to that later.
I'm Ray Mofield, and you just heard the voice of Shelby McCallum also, and we'll be asking a few questions. And, of course, you've already heard from Mr. O'Daniel, who's noted in the field of politics as well as many other endeavors as a merchant, as a civic citizen of some repute in our county. Now, to establish... Yes, sir.
Now, that sheriff's race, these two men were opponents. And a name for Lewis, Wallace, and Reeves for Dave Reeves. And when the election was held, which I presume was about August, that's the first time I know they used to have primaries, my father was one of the election officers. And that was held on Saturday, and he had no way of getting over here till on Monday to bring the box and the results of the election at Gilbertsville. So Mr. Wallace and Mr. Reeves, the race was so close, they got on their horses on Sunday morning and rode down to our house to find out the results of Gilbertsville precinct. And after my father had told them, they both grabbed their paper and went to figuring, and Mr. Wallace said to Mr. Reeves, "I beat you by 6 votes."
That is
19-3.
That's a wonderful story.
That's about as close as Will Ely's race we go.
Right, a little closer, a little closer.
Yeah, a little closer, yeah. I believe that was 8 votes.
Something like that.
Well, what a fine story from the past. We certainly appreciate your giving it to us.
I think it's interesting to note, too, Ray, that now, when we have elections, we know the results. If the polls close at 6 o'clock, usually by 6:30.
Oh.
And then you wouldn't get the results. Can you imagine the candidates, how nervous they would be?
They suffered longer, didn't they?
Yeah.
Mr. O'Daniel, to further establish your place in Marshall County, could you tell us your parents' names?
M.O. and Molly O'Daniel. And Molly O'Daniel was a provine before marrying my father.
Do you perchance remember either of the grandparents on your mother's or your father's side, or both?
No, I do not on my mother's side, because her parents died when she was small. But on my father's side, I do remember them both, and one of them died in 1910, the other in 1937, I believe. And I remember my grandmother's mother. She used to come and visit her, and she was in her 90s, I believe.
Some of those people lived to be a great age, even though medical care wasn't as good then as it is today. But the stronger ones, of course, held on as long as they do in our own time. I presume, since your name is O'Daniel, that you were from an Irish forebears.
I understand that's correct. There was about 6 brothers came from Ireland and landed in Kentucky, and they just scattered out. And there's still some up in Kentucky. I believe we have a senator now, O'Daniel, from Springfield, maybe, I believe it is. And some of them, one brother went south, and I believe he settled in Alabama, and the rest of them around in Kentucky, just in different parts of the state.
O'Daniel's a very famous name. I knew an O'Daniel, Henry, who was a school superintendent. What was it, Carlisle County? So the name is certainly widely known throughout our state and all over the country for that matter. Where did you go to school? I assume you were born in the county.
I was born in the county between Gibbertsville and McEwen, Kentucky, and what is known as Freedom's Corner, Marshall County.
I've heard that name once before on the series of tapes, and but before then I'd never heard it.
I'll explain that a little more to you, what I could find out.
All right, sir.
The Freedom's Corner was known as a place where they didn't want the sheriff around or the tax commissioner.
That's what we've been told.
And after you've heard you've read the book of Judges in the Bible, the last verse of the last chapter says they had no king in those days, and every man did according to that which he thought was right.
So
that's the way they lived.
that was the law in Freedom's Corner. Yeah. I expect in the early days of the frontier that was true just about everywhere. And so that puts you in sort of the northeastern side of the county. And
That's right.
So what school did you attend then?
I first started at Locust Grove, a little school on the Benton and Gilbertsville Road. I was there, I believe, 4 years, and I went over to Pinnacle School.
I believe that's the first time I've heard that name, Pinnacle.
Well, that's an old school, but it had just been moved from Mr. Boone Hill used to board at my mother's grandfather and grandmother and taught school there when it was at the old location.
Yes,
But
sir.
after they moved it over to the new one, it hadn't been going on but a year or two, and I started there in 1912. And Mr. Hugh Edwards was the teacher. And one of the most amusing things I ever heard of, to me it was, they at 9:30, I guess it was, we had recess, and of course gangs would go different parts of the playground. It was up on a hill, a very steep hill, and some part of the ground, two boys had a fight, which I didn't know anything about. But when I went with the books came for us to go back to classes or go into schoolhouse, a boy sat down by me, and he had his cap in his hand, and he laid it up on the desk, and Mr. Edwards then called for this boy and another boy to come up front. Well, this boy that was sitting with me grabbed his cap and out the door he went and down that hill, which was 100 yards off of the road, I guess, and says, "Catch me if you can." And Mr. Edwards says, "Well, I sure can." And out the door he went right behind and down the hill.
He didn't
Anyway,
wait for him to come back.
He didn't wait for him to come back. He ran right up the highway toward Birmingham, about 400 or 500 yards altogether, but he caught him. And I'm telling you what, we had a show in that schoolhouse. All of us were watching that race. And he brought him back to school and whipped him and the other boy too for fighting on the ground.
Yeah. Very fine incident. That's the type of thing we like. What was this school like? I guess it was one room. It wasn't logged, though, was it?
No, it had, and he had 50-odd students, or 50-odd or 60 students, and taught all grades, stayed through the 8th.
Not only that, there were about, I guess for the upper grades, you had 6 or 8 subjects, didn't you?
Oh, you did. That's
Ray,
right.
while you're on that subject, I've watched Mr. Lewis up at the clerk's office on election nights. He could beat the computer in adding up the returns. Now, I want to ask him this. Do you think that the schools today are doing as good a job of, or a better job in teaching the basics as they did back then?
The schools may be trying, but the students are not grasping it because they're not getting the help at home like I got.
I see you got help there.
I think I did. I know I did. My father was a pretty good mathematician,
Yeah.
and that was my favorite subject,
Well,
it and history.
you reach people now, and I think Ray, Dr. Mofield will agree that even graduate from college, that they have to use a computer.
I know.
They can't function at all hardly without mechanical.
That's right. They're not very good in math in general and not very good in spelling, and I suppose they drilled you in spelling quite a bit.
They had to, 'cause that was my weak one, I'll tell you that. I didn't get much on that until I got to Bowling Green Business University, and they taught me how to spell and write.
All right, you mentioned that one whipping. Did you ever get a whipping, Mr.
I did not.
A model scholar. Now that tells us something, Shelby.
Yeah.
They grow up to be fine citizens, don't they? So there possibly is some correlation there.
The
Well,
first day I started school, I come put Jerry. They, I guess, I was 6 years old, and Mr. Wilson Pace, I believe, was the teacher, and he let us boys and girls who were first year out about 15 minutes early to recess, and we were along that road that goes from Brownsburg to Gilbertsville, and a wagon load of men went along there, and they come in hollering at us boys playing up there. Well, that's a mistake they made, because we were there standing on a rock pile. And we got those rocks, and we went to sailing them out. And Mr. Pace came to the door and said, "You boys get in here, or I'm going to whip you." And he broke that out.
all right. You mentioned a moment ago that you had recess at 9:30,
I think it was.
and what kind of games did you play on the playground? Do you remember any of them?
Oh, ball, and one teacher, we had play parties and square dances behind the schoolhouse.
Mm-hmm.
And she got out there with us, too,
I
as a
see.
lady.
Taught some
And we had a big time. And,
some of the social graces and square dancing and so on. Well,
Yeah.
that's good. And she,
but most times ball or something on that, or jumping or something.
okay, you'd have little off the cuff track meets, jumps,
Oh, yeah.
this and that, and so on. All right, as a young man, what kind of recreation did you, away from school? Did you go to, apple bobbings, popcorn poppings, or play parties, or?
Yes, sir. We sure did. We went to the play parties and other recreation, pie suppers and things like that.
Tell us how a pie supper operated.
Well, you try to watch for the pie, the girl's pie that you was with or you thought the most of, and they'd put them up there, the one mix them up, and you didn't know whether you were going to get it or not, and you bid on them. Sometimes you got the prettiest girl, and sometimes the ugliest girl. But it's all in fun, and I never had no trouble. I never knew of any trouble. But each school would have one every year in our buck camp.
Were you married, Mr. O'Daniel?
I am. Yes, sir. Been 56 years, the 22nd of coming January.
I'd call that some kind of a record. There are not too many that make it to the 50th, and that's 56.
We found in these interviews that in those days the courtship was longer and the marriage lasted longer.
Whom did you marry, Mr. O'Daniel?
January the 22nd, 1927.
And your wife was, her name?
Beulah Lee Allen.
Beulah Lee Allen. Was she from this county?
She was from Gilbertsville.
How did you meet her?
At one of these play parties. But I knew her father and mother before, but I just never had spoke much to her. I hadn't talked to her.
Mm-hmm.
And I was leading the playing, and somebody stole my partner, and she was standing by the wall, and I just grabbed her, and we got good and friendly, and she was a good dancer. And so just went on from that, friendship, love.
Very good. Did you have children?
I have two, a son who works at Penwald. I don't know what he's got. And then my daughter's out on the highway at the toll road.
I see her, and when I get on and pay the toll there at the Benton toll
Well,
station
she's,
sometimes. Well, that's very good. Does your son have any children?
He had three,
So
one boy
you-
and two girls.
So you have some grandchildren
I
and
do not have no grandchildren. Well, I do have grandchildren, but don't have no great-grandchildren.
no great-grandchildren yet. Okay. Now, after you finished school there, I believe I heard you say you continued your education in Bowling Green. Tell us a little about that.
Well, that was one of the... I borrowed the money from the Bank of Gilbertsville. Actually, in 1922, I graduated from high school here at Benton. and we attended school from Gilbertsville and boarded at old Jailer McDaniel. Everybody remembers Uncle Jim McDaniel. The 4 years during the school months, and then I went on to Bowling Green. And that fall and spring, I learned more. Well, I guess I was ready for it, but I learned more than I ever did anywhere in 6 or 8 months. I mean,
At Bowling Green, that school was rather famous. I once knew a governor of Mississippi who attended that school.
The
And
Dickies was the man who found it, and one was the president, and one was the teacher. They all taught
it was a
to.
2-year school.
No, it was just long till you graduated. I had I forgot, life endowment course is what I paid for, I believe.
Oh.
But I never did go back and finish it, but I got a lot out of it anyhow.
Yes, sir. Well, I take it that since you went to school there, you were not interested in becoming a farmer, which is traditional in the county.
That's what I had to do while I was out of school a lot of time. And I was raised on a farm, and we raised tobacco and wheat and corn.
Tobacco, wheat, and corn, and the toughest crop of all was I guess the tobacco, wasn't it?
Well, it took longer to get any money out of it, then you didn't get much back then, sure enough.
All right. Did you ever live any place outside of Marshall County, aside from just going to
I
school at
think
Bowling Green?
I did live a little bit out, but I don't remember. Only one little instance that happened in 1904 or 5, somewhere along in that neighborhood. My father and Mr. Jim Johnson, no, Henry Johnson, bought a flour mill up at Wadesboro, Kentucky, and we moved to Wadesboro. And I don't know whether that railroad was just coming through there at that time or not, but they saw the mill was in the wrong place.
Yes,
And
sir.
they moved it from Wadesboro down to Hardin, and it's still there today. I believe one time it burned through in there. Was that a few years ago, or
No,
like
sir.
it did a burn in there?
It didn't burn. Jerry Trimble and his partner, Jack Dunnigan, took it and remodeled it and made a kind of a farm supply store out of it.
Well, then my father, after that, well, I remember living at Wadesboro. I remember helping Mama churn out on the back porch. I remember that. I guess I was 3 years old or something like that. But then after my father sold it, his half back to Mr. Johnson, and we went back down by Gilbertsville. I met you in that little post office that was out there on the highway, and bought the farm where the Philbeck boys lived when the TVA came along. Fred and Sam owned it at the time, I believe.
Do you have any idea what you paid, say, per acre for land then?
Not much. I know I don't. I just don't know about that money part, what the farms cost. I remember we went over and bought one after we sold that, and he sold it to a couple of men for $2,000, and it was about 60 some odd acres and a pretty good house on it. And the house was there when the TVA tore it down. And they thought that was a big price for it.
All right. Now, you said at the beginning that you were always interested in politics. Did you ever run for office of any kind?
Well, I didn't actually run. I got elected mayor here once, but not nobody running against me.
I'd like to ask him this. He has always been a key figure on election night. And as I told you a moment ago, he could beat Toad Bryan's calculator with the results. How do you think politics in Kentucky has changed down through the years? Do you think it's more honest now than it was in those back in those days, or do you think that it's?
I don't think that apply down here in this county.
Yeah.
But now I think statewide you could say it is more honest.
Yeah. Well, I would agree with you.
Yeah. Do you recall who was that governor that was elected by about 200 and some odd votes, and that was what the majority he got in Jefferson County? You remember who that was?
No, I
A.O.
don't.
Stanley, I believe.
Probably so. It was a close race, but I don't remember the
Yeah, I see.
specifics. No.
And they said that just the vote that he got, extra votes he got in Jefferson County, the election. And that's the state believing. I remember that, but I've forgotten who it was.
Well, I remember too. and I'm sure Mr. Lewis will, that it was no element of dishonesty involved, but the wiring in the courthouse was very, very inadequate, and nearly every election night the fuse would blow and the lights would go out while they were counting the votes.
Yes,
And I remember one time I was running for office, and I called some friend of mine in Frankfurt, wanted to know how I was doing. I said, well, the lights are out now. And he said, my gosh, you've lost the election. I said, no nonsense.
Yeah.
No, I don't think that happened. I never did hear of it in Marshall County. I never did believe there was any votes stolen.
Well, that's great.
Well, that's certainly an excellent record for us. Mr. O'Daniel, about what year were you mayor?
1955 through 58, I believe, right. I don't know where.
What would you say, or what do you regard, in your opinion, as the thing that was your greatest accomplishment as mayor? What were some of the problems then?
Well, those problems were,
Of course, in a way, I guess they're always the same. You've got more services needed and not enough money to do it. But
we had one thing, it was the coal dust all over the city, and I wanted to get natural gas, and going through our county, I thought we should. But I was told that we couldn't, but me and the council thought we could, and we got it. I signed the bonds for it, and I believe it never was put in until the next year after I was out.
many people are very thankful for that today, that you did.
And then there is two schools of thought on the city of growing. I told you, I guess, that I graduated from high school here in 1922, and I wasn't back. I worked off from home for the Illinois Central Railroad for 16 years, and wasn't in Benton over 3 or 4 times during that 16 years. And when I graduated from high school, I knew about where everybody lived and what house they lived in. And when I moved to this city again in 1944, I still knew just about where everybody lived. It hadn't grown much at 44. There were a few extra houses, and everybody was anxious to see Benton grow. And there's two schools of thought on there that you must make the man who puts in the subdivision pay for all the water and lights and sewers and everything. And another thought is, if you want to grow, you've got to pay for it. And if the citizens wanted to grow, they had to help Benton grow. And they'd have to help put in those sewers and water. And of course, the results was, at my council, and we had men working, that if the man who was putting in that subdivision would help buy the material, we would help put it in.
It is sort of a mix.
Sort of a mixed deal. And that way, we got it going, and I understand that's still the method they're still using here in the city.
Mr. Lewis, you've known a number of our governors personally, and some of them intimately. Would you want to make any kind of assessment as to who's been, the various governors that you've known? How would you rate them?
I doubt if I could. Very intelligent anyhow. I thought, of course, my favorite governor was Bert Combs.
Yes, sir. I know you were
I
good
did
friends.
that on his campaign here twice.
And he was able to get the legislature to enact a sales tax, which was desperately
but
needed.
however, the people had done voted that. It had to do it.
Yeah.
And of course, he'd used part of it then to run the government and part of it for the school people. And that was where that I thought he did a great thing for the school people.
I would have predicted that would be your answer, Ray. Go ahead.
Ned Bethel was another great governor, though, I think, to say that. And Happy Chandler, the first time, was a great governor. But the last time, he was mad all the time he's up there.
All right. Those are very fine stories, and we have a few more minutes here. We'd like to ask you about any particularly funny things that you can remember about growing up, about, maybe being treated with old-time remedies if you were sick. Did you ever have to take calomel? My dad
Yes,
used
sir,
to talk
lots
about
of it. We're down on the Tennessee River. We had a lot of malaria, and that calomel was knocked that out. But they tell me if it gets in your system, it'll stay there a lifetime. And I know I was up and working in Illinois for the railroad, and I had a chill there one night, just a regular old chill. I'd had them back when I was a boy. And I got a doctor over there, and he told me that would stay in your system for just all your life, almost.
I think that's right. I took calomel too. I don't know about Ray, but
Don't recall ever having had calomel, but they used to give you quinine for malarial. I remember how bitter that stuff was.
Both.
And castor oil. Don't ever forget that.
That's right.
That's when I had typhoid fever once, and that's all the medicine I took was castor oil. Every other day I'd take a dose.
It made me, Mr. Lewis, hate oranges until I was in my teens.
Then you
Because
hate
my
root
mother
beer.
always mixed orange juice with the castor oil.
Yeah, root beer was the way they got it down me, and I sure don't want none of that today.
Memories are long, aren't they?
I was in Akron, Ohio when I had the typhoid fever. I was up there working, and got a doctor. I worked at Goodrich, I believe it was, and he came out there and he told me what I had, and I said, "You've been down in Kentucky drinking well water."
Yeah, yes, sir.
That's what he laid it on to.
Now, when you left the
And that's right.
railroad, you came back to Benton. Did you open a grocery store along about that time?
No, when I left the railroad, I worked 5 years for the TVA in the building of the Kentucky Dam. And then after I was laid off there, I bought a grocery in 1941 as a partnership with Jack Henderson. And Jack, about 1952, they was calling him back to, I don't know where the TVA was calling him back, I guess, as a guard. He was a guard. And I just bought him out. We made a deal that we'd give or take a certain price, and I set mine, and he took me up. I mean, I said what I'd give or I'd take, and he took me up, and I had to pay him off, and I ran that till, well, I was crippled in 1973, but I didn't work in it all the time. For the last 8 years, I worked in the revenue department of the state of Kentucky when this sales tax came in effect. They told me they wanted me to teach people as well as I could in Marshall and Callaway. And I worked in Crittenden and Livingston County and McCracken, and how it operated, and to get them started out on it correctly, and I did my best.
What was your favorite recreation?
Oh, ball games.
Yeah, very good.
Play ball and still watch them listen on the radio and TV together.
Do you recall your first radio listening? Did you go to some neighbor's house to hear it, or had you bought a set of your own? Or
I just don't remember. I heard of, I guess, a few, but I got one just as soon as I could, because I was working on the railroad and I had a little money. That's back in the Depression, of course, and I could buy a little radio. They were cheap then, and I took one home with me.
Well, Shelby, you generally come in as we get to about the last 2 minutes and ask a question or two, and we'd like for you to do that now, if you would.
Yes, I would. I consider Mr. Lewis O'Daniel one of my closest friends, and both personally and politically for many years. And we've asked everyone this question: if you had your life to live over again, would you still choose to make Marshall County your home?
Visited in, I don't know, and worked in several different states. I know that some of them got blacker soil.
Yeah.
And some good people in all the states, and good churches, and good schools. But I never found any that beat Marshall County.
Well, you gave us the same answer that 20 other people have given us. So yeah, I believe we're going to have a few people stick around a while. How about Christmas? Has Christmas celebrations changed much since you were young?
Well, there's more. Yes, it's gone more commercial.
More commercial.
I think so.
Well, we certainly appreciate your coming over this morning. It's rainy morning. This is a rainy morning. We're recording this, and now here's Ray Mofield.
Thank you, Shelby, and thank you, Mr. Louis R. O'Daniel, We've enjoyed this interview, which has been produced with a grant from WCBL Radio for the Marshall County Library and in cooperation with the statewide program, so that a copy of the tape will also be stored permanently at the State Archives building in Frankfort and at the Pogue Oral History Library at Murray State University. This is Ray Mofield speaking. We have one more item here. Go right ahead.
The greatest gift we can bestow is the light we give to others. That's been my motto.
Thank you again, Mr. O'Daniel.